The next person that I'd like to introduce, if we can bring him up on the stage and let everybody see Babar Bhatti's smiling face. Babar is from IBM and is harnessing the power of language models for business applications.
All right, I'm on.
You sound great. Go ahead. You got 20 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity, and it was great to hear from the other speakers, really so many great perspectives. So what I want to do today is to share my point of view on what are these large language models and should you use them for business applications? And if yes, what are some of the critical considerations that are needed? So just a little bit of intro. I'm on LinkedIn. That's the best way to reach me and see what I post. I've also a blog on Medium where you can see some of my posts about AI in the developments. And I run a nonprofit called Dallas AI, which has over 5,000 members, and it's focused on providing free education on AI, whether you're in Dallas or not. We have programs that help you out, and we were actually fortunate to have Dr. Harvey Castro on our meetup last month. So we're always looking for great speakers. I also had a startup a while ago which used machine learning for analytics, and currently I work for IBM as customer success for data and AI. But today I'll be presenting my personal point of view. And I want to tell the story in a little bit different point of view from the previous speakers about, what is different about today's language models and going beyond the ChatGPT thing to really take a look at what's behind them and what kind of strengths and weaknesses do they have. So there's a lot of buzz about, these models, and the reality is that last year, we have started a whole global AI race. There are very strong point of views on both sides, and I'll be talking a little bit about some of the potential harms from this model, how to avoid those, but still being successful with AI. I think everybody by now has a very good idea of what these technologies are. So I'll just not even walk through this. But let me talk about foundation models because I think this topic needs some attention. The beauty of these foundation models, as compared with the previous generation of AI models, is that you don't need a ton of labeled data to start using these models. You take a lot of data, in this case of language models, you take language, text, numbers, code, anything, and the model trains itself. That's the P in GPT, pre-trained. And then these models are able to do some amazing things. And the other beautiful thing is, even if you didn't train them for something specific, they are very adaptable for new tasks. One of the great things about these models is they can follow human instructions, which in technical terms is called intent understanding. So they can answer questions as we have seen in this chat app, but they can also do a lot of other things. Now, these foundation models, I know some speakers have previously talked about applications of these models in science like biology, medicine, proteins, all kinds of things. That's the beauty of these foundation models, and they are not necessarily all chat-based. So the foundation models are the big class of things, and that's a term that was defined by researchers at Stanford team. And then these language models such as ChatGPT or Bard and others, they are a subset of these foundation models, which means that foundation models are not limited to language. They can be applied to science, business, all kinds of things. And we are just barely scratching the surface on finding interesting use cases for these. And again, the beauty is that you have one big model, and now you can do a lot of things. Before, generative AI and foundation models, you had the kind of AI where you had to start from scratch every time. You had to take a lot of labeled data, you had to train a model, and then that model would do something specific like identifying objects in an image. And it used to do a really good job, but the problem was that most organizations did not have the resources to start from scratch every time. Now with generative AI, you have the option to just go and use a model which is out there. And of course, you guys know that these days, every day there are 4 or 5 more new models being announced. So now in this decade, foundation models, generative AI have become the dominant type of AI, and there's no really going back. And these models have come up with a whole set of new applications. So we are at the nexus of, creativity by humans combined with the creativity by computers and AI. So this is a really new phase. So, my topic today is mostly around text, but code is also a kind of text. So any of you, if you're, in the software field, which was my field for many years, the code generation capabilities of these models are pretty impressive. And so are the image, speech, video, interior design, and a lot of other applications. And I found this, to be really amusing, that out of all the disruptions, there is some interesting things. Even the fortune cookie industry is going through upheaval. So let's talk about a few applications of business which are sort of obvious. I think people have really talked a lot about creating all kinds of copies, messages, contracts, everything. But there's also a whole lot of application in creating new products, designing them, coming up with personas, writing user experience notes, coming up with help about how the products. So there's a whole lot of activity going on. And of course, marketing was the original application of these GPT models. And there are companies like Copy.ai and others which focus on those. Sales is, I think, something that's going to be huge in coming times. If you think about it, how can you personalize selling? And I'll have a little more over it. And another thing is that analytics used to be something that, a lot of geeks used to do, but now a lot of advanced analytics is going to become very, very easy to do with the help of these models. Okay? So if you use Excel at work or personally, good news, you have a really good friend who can help you with these crazy complex formulas. So out of all those, let's zoom in on sales a little bit. I know if you have ever worked with salespeople and technology sales or any kind of complex sales, you understand that it can be really hard to generate leads. It can be really hard to understand new products, and it's not easy to kind of pitch these products and customize these kind of pitch to your customers. But with generative AI, it's really helpful with interactive tests. So the creative and organic nature of selling is an amazing opportunity for the AI to help you out. And just like, previous speakers have talked about Khan Academy, how it's using AI for education, I think this is just going to become a very standard thing. And of course, the whole idea of conversational AI, which informally is called chatbots, has changed. So there is no going back to the previous sort of underperforming chatbots where half of the time they didn't really understand what you were saying and people would get really frustrated. I think you will see a really fast uptick on smart conversational AI, which combines understanding of language with some domain knowledge that the companies can provide and the ability to just do a very human-like interaction. Now, so far, everything has been good, but let me just switch to the other side, where these, just like nuclear power plants, which this photo is about, LLMs can be pretty harmful. And that's where I'll put this challenge in front and say, hey, can you come up with a list of all the potential problems? Well, let me take it back. Not all the problems. Let's just come up with 3 or 4. Well, a lot of these models are black box. They don't really tell us how they were trained, how they were fine-tuned, what kind of human feedback was given. A lot of this data was just taken from by these models, and it was really a privacy issue. There are a lot of lawsuits going around this. So, and a number of these models cannot really explain why they came up with a certain answer. Now, note that I have not mentioned hallucination because I don't like that term. I think hallucination is, and I'll later chat with Dr. Harvey on that, but it's associated with a certain human trait. I think what these models lack is groundedness, because they're all probability-based models, so they are always producing content which sounds good. It may not have anything to do with factual basis. It has no idea what thing is right or wrong. Obviously, the data that it's used to train with can introduce bias. And I think this was mentioned that currently these models are using a lot of English-based, results. So they're not really representing the rest of the world. So there's this problem that it's not really fair. And I've linked an article about generative AI's responsible use, so you can go and read more. But regardless of these potential problems, these models have forever changed the way we're going to work, and we are not going to go back. What's going to happen is we're going to go towards more and more integrations of these models of AI with other functionality in tech that we have, whether it's planning, whether it's creating tasks, whether it's creating these complex workflows, combining a lot of these checks and balances. So this is where a lot of the companies are working on. At the end of the day, the question is, are these models reliable and trustworthy for business applications? And that's where, I have a very simple framework. Do you require accurate, correct information? Well, these models are not going to guarantee that. Have you put in some sort of filters in place? If there are none, then you shouldn't use that. Are there any legal or compliance requirements? Can you prove the reliability of these against some sort of a legal framework? Are your models explainable to the extent needed by the business use case? If so, it's again your choice whether you go to a conventional AI or these kind of AI. And at the end of the day, as a business, what is your acceptable risk range? You define it, you put a benchmark, and you try these. So there are these very two polar camps. On one side, you have people who think that ChatGPT and these large models are the best thing ever. On the other hand, you have people like Gary Marcus, who went to Capitol Hill, and he told everyone that we should be regulating these. And even Jeffrey Hinton, the professor who invented these deep learning, he's saying that there are a lot of dangers that even he did not see. So we have to really use them carefully. And one way to use them and learn from them is what people, previous speakers also mentioned. Very carefully create these prompts which can, help the model create content which is safe and useful. So, we don't obviously have time, but if you go and read my blog posts, I kind of detail out the best ways to kind of craft these prompts. And you don't have to be an engineer or a technical person. But if you are a technical person, I included a few slides which kind of talk about what is the relative cost and effort of taking these models and creating a version that is safe for business, that can use your data, but gives you some certain guarantees. The funny thing is that, the companies which have open in their name, they're not really open, they're closed models. And there's a whole ton of open source models from Hugging Face and other companies, which are available today. But, the open source is as free as a puppy is free, right? You can't just use an open source model without doing some extra work. So hopefully some of these slides at the end give you a way to compare these proprietary models where you can hit an API and use them versus some of these open source models where the models may be free. They may have a license that allows you to do commercial work, but they may not be fine-tuned for doing some of those things. So in reality, all of the major companies are rushing in to create these models, or saying that, you can build your own model with your own data in your own data center so that it's completely private, but it will require cost, effort, and skills. So depending on where you are in the spectrum, you can choose to either start with a commercial model over an API, which is, over time, the cost will really, really increase, or you can partner with a company that allows you to create a model, or you can use open source models with some modifications. So as a business, you will always have choices, but it all depends on how much risk are you willing to take and whether you have the time and resources to work on it. So just to wrap it up, you can find a lot more information in some of the links in the deck, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I write about AI and you can see my posts. So I'll stop here, and I will be happy to take questions and answer them later on.
Well, as a matter of fact, people will have questions for you and all the speakers, and I see that you've been putting in the chat. The chat is really, really active, and people have commented on your presentation. Babar, thank you again for a very inspiring presentation that had some nice complementary content to the rest of the people that we've heard from.